Radio Retro Future.
Oh yeah. 386s. It's basically down to pure simplicity for those things. Plus everything. We're kind of slowly shifting away from that kind of stuff now. But everything we've built software and servers and everything has been in conjunction with that hardware. So everything is designed to work on it. And it's only now that with new processors, new systems, new designs and so forth, and more open sourceness, that we're getting a kind of new generation of equipment and software, which includes new processors, which is even more exciting when you consider Google and what was the name? I can't remember. But the ones they're working on quantum processors, type that can be like, instead of 1 and 0, it's 1 and 0 and everything in between.
Wow.
At the same time.
Wow. And I thought binary was difficult. Speaking of binary, let's get started with our conversation about Ghost in the Shell, where we are here about. So let's just start a little bit with, basically who you are, because you haven't made an appearance on the show yet.
I know, I've been meaning to for ages, it's just getting around to it. It's the hard part. I'm Sergeant Dutch Baracuda of the Army of Toy Soldiers. I run Toy Soldiers Unite. And that is my lovely wife in the background.
Good evening, madam.
What we do is we're an online community from all around the world. We've got 4,000, 5,000-ish users, and I just administrate, keep things running, keep our digital bunker rolling, so to speak. And in my spare time, I am a huge aficionado of technology and future trends.
Right. Yeah, well, we should really talk about that, like what Elon Musk is presenting right now as we speak, which we'll have to see later or tomorrow. I mean to do more of that kind of stuff on the show, actually.
No, you definitely should. I mean, the future is for steampunk, for example. The future is one of the greatest inspirations, as well as Neo-Victoriana and basically everything from the 19th and 18th century. And at the same time, is one of the greatest influences in everything. Cyberpunk is. It's funny how something that hasn't happened yet can inspire such huge and massive creativity in the world and in fiction.
Yeah, we should discuss that sometime. We really do. But let's keep our conversation focused for tonight. However, you did have an announcement to make regarding to Toy Soldiers, I think. You started a Patreon, didn't you?
That's not yet done yet. We're in the process of setting all of that up. Hopefully it should be set up by next month at the latest. The idea is that I do spend quite a few hours a day, almost as much as a full-time job, running the website, sending off stuff, writing articles and this, that, the other. Not so much at the moment because mostly part-time, but I want to make it full-time. I want to be able to entertain, inspire, educate, and provide a lot of content. And with Patreon, it would help basically keep me alive, and not have to get a full-time job elsewhere in some mundane office.
Right. I know how that feels. Trust me.
And at the same time, it also help get new content for the site as well as for the internet in general. Everything from covering transport costs, equipment, services, and so forth and so forth. Being able to actually pay my code monkey a decent wage for all the work he does. I mean, at the moment, I'm just paying him in bananas.
Airhead, right?
Yes, Engineer Airhead. Great guy. Very...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. Dutchies, I forget.
Yes. But yeah, well, if there is no more, nothing more news on the toy soldiers, I suggest we start about have a little chat about Ghost in the Shell. So, what was your first experience with Ghost in the Shell?
My first experience, well, I think for a lot of people like me, it was the original movie. And I think when the first time I watched it, it was in Japanese and subtitled. It was, alongside Star Trek, one of the biggest influences in my life when it came to the future. And the idea of prosthetic bodies, tank robots, and a future that isn't dystopian or utopian at the same time. It's pretty much as it is now, just more advanced. It has its issues and so forth, but it also has its benefits. Mm-hmm. And I found it absolutely fascinating.
Yes, well, my first experience was a rather weird one, I suppose. My first time hearing about it was probably also the original movie. What was that, 1969 or something?
I think it was 95.
95. Extremely, well, ahead of its time. A matter of fact, it would influence a lot of future animation as well as movies, which we'll get into a little later. However, the first time I saw it was in a gaming magazine called Power Limited, which was one of the pioneers.
I remember that magazine.
Yeah.
And I do mean the Dutch version of it. I remember that very well.
Yeah, it was really unique in its time, especially in the Netherlands. It was the only one for a long time, and I really enjoyed it as a kid. You know, I played Mega Drive back then.
I was Nintendo.
Yeah. Yes. Well, Sega does what Nintendo. Well, actually, we didn't have those commercials back then. In the Netherlands, I mean, those were American commercials. But I started playing PC around that time as well. I was those were the end days of the 16-bit era, I think. Yeah. And then I started playing Syndicate, a video game by Stephen Molyneux. I first played it on the Mega Drive, which worked with a horrible passcode system. But then I got an Amiga 500, which I bought second-hand of a friend of mine. And it had a correct version. You know, back then it was all those diskettes. It came on 2 diskettes, I think, which is like, what? Not even 3 megabytes or something? Or just about?
It would have been 1.88.
Oh, okay, so a little bit...
no, 2.88.
Oh, even... Okay. Anyway, but I became a real fan of that version of Syndicate, and then, somewhere in 1969, Syndicate Wars came out for the PC, and I just got a PC. And that one actually had trailers of the Ghost in the Shell movies. And me being a... what was I, like 14? I'm sure. Yeah, 14. No, it had boobies in it, so I needed to see it.
Oh, yeah. Animated boobies. So much better than the 16-bit ones we found online.
Yes, exactly. And
well, on the computer.
But, you know, Syndicate Wars was really unique because it had such footage in a video game, and it was also 3-dimensional, which also, and with a lot of destructible environments. Anyway, I was also heavily into ElfQuest around that time, because boobies.
Yeah.
And the same Flemish publisher that printed ElfQuest in Dutch also had the Dutch uncensored version of Ghost in the Shell. And when I say uncensored, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
More boobies and more blood and guts.
Yeah. Yes, that too. Also, you know, the lesbian orgy that happens, that doesn't exist in the censored versions. You know why it was a lesbian orgy?
No.
Because Masuma Shiro, the creator, didn't like to draw male butts during that period.
But that explains why Bato always has a tiny ass.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even I think about that. But he doesn't have that problem now, as is unfortunately very well known.
Mm,
He only draws porn, as far as I'm aware, these days. So for Playboy and
yeah.
in his very unique style. Anyway, that's basically how I got into the manga. And so I read the manga, but I couldn't really understand it because, 14, 15.
And
Then,
having the
however,
opposite direction.
then, however, I got a friend of mine, someone I still interact with at a regular basis now, was a moderator on one of those anime suki. I don't know if it still exists, but it was a really huge anime network back then, and he had all these burned CDs because there was no other way to get anime in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
or you had to buy these really terrible mangas of animes published by Manga Entertainment as such, which
Yeah.
were horrible series and far too expensive for me. So yeah, there are so many memories for me connected to Ghost in the Shell. It's incredible. But then I saw the movie. It's a beautiful movie, but it's also rather boring, very slow at times.
Yeah, it's unless you are actually interested in the philosophy that comes along with Ghost in the Shell, it is a bit of a drag. As you mentioned, it had a whole lot of other fortes. The animation, the first time CGI was used with a animated movie, and a whole variety of other firsts.
The
But
bullet
if you,
impacts.
but it's as a straightforward kind of movie, it's slow. You wouldn't expect it to be a huge blockbuster in the cinemas.
It wasn't.
No. However, it did create a cult following because of the philosophy that it espoused, and because of all this first-time features, the impact it had, and so forth. And that's, I think, what helped it along a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was. It brought the entire. I think it was my first interaction with cyberpunk. I did play Syndicate, which is heavily based upon the how the Matrix works in Ghost in the Shell. And I have some screenshots of the movie, if I'm correct. Yeah, which I'll show, which also clearly show the influence the original movie has had on the new one, or will have, I should say. Yeah, it is really intriguing, especially the idea of how the digital world works in Ghost in the Shell is extremely influential, probably the most influential. Could you explain it to the listeners a little bit?
I think what's because I just thought of at the exact same time another movie that came out at the same time was Johnny Mnemonic, which is another huge cyberpunk movie starring Keanu, I'm a wooden board, Reeves.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really good kind of comparison of the two cyberpunk influences of the 90s. Whereas Johnny Mnemonic used a lot of... It was very heavy on the CGI when it came to exploring the net. And it picturized the actual cities with areas, and you fly through it like some kind of Superman. Whereas with the likes of Ghost in a Shell, it wasn't using the same kind of architecture when it comes to the internet. It didn't have the same kind of ports. It had, like, you could only access the internet at these certain places or anything. No, the internet was ubiquitous everywhere. You were online constantly. You are, your mind is at the same time interacting in real life as it is interacting with things online. And there wasn't the kind of cheesy towering blocks of data. There were some, but at the same time there was actual thought put behind what will the internet look like. And it wasn't like an artist's interpretation, it was more of an engineer's interpretation of what the internet would look like. I think that's also one of the things that greatly helped out. Without it making it look too fantastical, it looked kind of realistic. Back then, back in '95, we had a huge kind of surge of virtual reality, and we're getting that again, but this time it's actually working. Last time it was like gloves, full-on helmet, and everything, and cheesy as anything. It just seemed completely out of place and like a fad that would last barely 5 years. Now, because we've got mobile phones in our pockets, we are constantly connected. There are only a few instances when you are not reachable. That's A, when your battery runs out, or B, when you're underground or out of reception area. Any other time, you are always connected to the internet. And I think that's one of the greatest things that I don't know if that was a prediction or if that was purposely inspiring from Ghost in the Shell.
Well, the central question to Ghost in the Shell is, where is the dividing line between man and machine? And that is where the idea of the cyber brain comes in, where basically anyone who can afford it has replaced its biological brain with a supercomputer that's always connected to their version of the internet. So much so that the world has a digital overlay displaying all information at all time. And, because this is Section 9, which is a anti-terrorist unit, they have all personal information at their fingertips at all time. And that's one, and you've got the cables that connect to the neck to many of these people.
I'll pause you for one moment and show you. Just like that.
Oh, nice.
I'm planning ahead.
It's not finished yet.
No. Obviously, I still need someone to actually put a couple of USB ports in there. It's just a layout.
Well, who knows? It could be.
It's just for the surgeons to go. It's just for the surgeons to say to the surgeons, right? You plug them in here, okay?
Yeah. And then it turns out they use a different kind of connector. Damn it! Who knows? But that's also very much one of the appeals. Indeed, like you said, all the cybernetics and the cyborgs, which at one end it's wonderful because you've got this is especially touched upon in one of the later series, Arise. Where they've got like these people that actually have replaced their entire bodies so they can be young forever. So all these it explores. It doesn't just say from, oh, look at all this awesome technology. No, it actually explores the psychological effects of such, and it also displays a lot of fetishism going on the net, like the lesbian orgy we just discussed, which actually does have a very interesting conclusion where Bato, who's male, accidentally enters that simulation, and then he gets in a kind of a panic because he's, well,
it's not his thing.
It's not only it's not his thing, or at least in the Dutch translation, it actually touches upon the fact that this software may be gendered. That it is that the even though it's probably an afterthought by Mansume because he doesn't like to draw male bots in that period.
Yeah.
But he is that in a little caption it says that Bato's male brain couldn't process the information, that only women could actually enjoy that simulation. So that's
I think we have kind of moved on from that because obviously every brain is different, and there might be some biological differences, but I think that wouldn't be applied anymore in this day and age. However, you do bring up a good point in that it actually thought about the issues of cybernetics, because one of the issues in that is brought up in the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, which is the animated series, which is by far my favorite part of the entire franchise, is that series.
Yeah, actually, mine too.
One of the things was cyberbrain sclerosis or cyberbrain autism, basically where either you get locked into your own cyberbrain, you don't interact with the world, not because you don't want to or anything, but because that's just how your mind works. There's a lot of parallels with real-world autism and Asperger's and sclerosis. There was that one episode where they had to go and investigate a medical center for people with autism, or more specifically, cyberbrain autism, where if they were actually let loose on the internet, they would probably completely forget about their bodies.
Right. Yeah.
And pretty much, and that's something that comes across these days as well as someone who is autistic to a certain degree. It depends, obviously, because no autism is the same as next.
Exactly.
But it can happen to the point where you completely bypass and forget you have a human body, and you're so ingrained in what you are doing or what you love or what your mind pinpoints focus on, that everything just drops away. And if that's interrupted, complete and utter meltdown.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting. The series also touched upon the subject of cybernetics and how you identify, as what kind of gender you identify with. As we learn, this is kind of a spoiler for those who gonna watch Arise, which is not my favorite part of the series, but a very interesting one nonetheless, where it turns out that Major Kusanagi has actually spent a number of years as a male resistance fighter. And also suggested that Bato actually also suggests to her she should replace her body for a male one, because then she can fit more upgrades into it.
Yeah.
So.
And then, of course, she points out all the advantages a female model has over a male one, and it probably suits her kind of style of fighting and
she's a
cybernetic combat.
Well, she's a wizard class hacker, as they call her. I remember this. They mentioned this in Arise. I don't know if they mentioned this in other versions of Ghost in the Shell.
It was touched upon in Standalone Complex when they were dealing with the Laughing Man. They addressed Laughing Man as a AAA wizard class hacker, and it was kind of in tone that puts her on the same level as Major Kusanagi.
Right. And she actually defeats Bato in Arise when they meet by hacking him. You know, the effect that you can actually hack people. And
in real time, as you're looking at them and talking to them.
Yeah. So that's, it touches about, it's basically also a metaphor for the biological brain, because, when you've got people who take on entirely different personalities in the series. But, this is also true for people who have schizophrenia or other kind of personality disorders that, they cannot differentiate their own fantasy from reality. But, in the case of cyberbrain, someone else creates that fantasy for you, which is, quite scary thought.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next topic. So the new real life Ghost in the Shell movie is going to be released next year in 2017. And what, unfortunately, one of the most discussed topics is Scarlett Johansson taking on the role of the protagonist, Toko Kusanagi, who's clearly, in the movie it's not clear where it actually takes place. It might take place in Hong Kong. However, the standalone complex clearly
Tokyo.
Is Tokyo exactly?
Yeah, it is with all of pretty much Ghost in the Shell is influencers in the Neo Tokyo or just Tokyo. But as far as the movie itself, we know nothing other than that.
However, a lot of people are against, Scarlett Johansson having the role. Because, well, she's obviously not Japanese. Personally, I also think it's a rather odd casting choice, especially as we got plenty of, let me see, who we have as alternative suggestions to people. Oh, God damn it, OBS, why do you do this to me? Okay, this, I hope this would work, but obviously it won't. But let me say there you've got Rinko, what's her name?
Rinko
Kikuchi, who was also in Pacific Rim, is one very popular choice. And the girl, the giggling girl from Kill Bill,
Kuriyama.
Yes, I am. I have no knowledge of celebrities and stuff like that. So, but of course the argument is like Ghost in the Shell is a rather unknown title to, I think, the mainstream audience. So, of course, a famous actress like Scarlett Johansson, who is known to have expertise with action movies, would be let's say a popular choice. I do not necessarily agree with it, apart from her race. But what's your opinion on the whole whitewashing debacle?
Well, I think one of the arguments that they've used to defend against it is that it's never actually stated in the anime or the manga or anything what nationality or ethnicity Major Kusanagi is. However, they've gone on to say that with the movie, it's not going to be just Japan. In fact, they don't actually say anything about where it's set, just that it's going to have a very worldly feel about it. There are going to be many nations, many nationalities and ethnicities involved. But the counter to that is that they're taking something that is intrinsically a part of Japanese culture, and we're not just talking about the characters here, who for all Japanese animation make very little. They don't make much difference physically between different ethnicities for the most part. That it's still Japanese culture, Japanese philosophy, for the most part, and it's very Asian focused. And what they're doing at the moment seems to be taking all of that into consideration. Everything from the geishas we saw in the trailer, the android geisha.
Possibly a gynoid, right?
Yeah, exactly. You probably recognize it from one of the standalone complex episodes.
And Ghost Shell 2.0 also has a lot with gynoids.
Exactly. Then there's the Buddhist monks, and Buddhism and Taoism, the philosophies espoused in those, also very much intrinsical into the entire Ghost in a Shell mythos. Everything from the individual state, enlightenment, be it transference, transcendence into the net or into a separate level of being. All of these things are intrinsically tied to Japan and Asian cultures and philosophies. So seeing those things, and we've only seen tiny bits of it in the trailer,
Right.
but all of those things, including the original Ghost in the Shell style, the atmosphere, the ambience, the music, and obviously the major features such as Kusanagi waking up on a bed in front of a window, all of those things are absolutely spot on.
Exactly.
They are exactly accurate to Ghost in a Shell. So why is this one thing, everything else is spot on except for Major Kusanagi? Why did they... It's obvious why they did it, but why did they feel they could do that separately and not keep it as part of the entire mythos that was created?
Right. Well, it's indeed rather interesting that they... I think it's rather odd indeed that they don't make it a rather more United States oriented movie in that regard. Because, and we already kind of touched upon this, because although, we both love the original movie, but we love the original movie for what it represents. Because it is not a movie you're like, oh yeah, let's just go watch Ghost in the Shell, when you're with friends or something. You just don't do that. Because at times the movie feels like a damn tech demo. A very impressive tech demo for 1959. Absolutely. But when you want to understand its philosophy, I would say, just watch a episode of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. Because then you only get a snippet of the philosophy, but at least you'll be able to understand it without having to hear the same monologue 3 times and make sense of that.
The advantage the series has is, as you say, it takes snippets of the philosophies explored throughout the movies, but more importantly, also explores the facets around them in literally standalone episodes, as well as complex story arcs throughout both seasons. And yes, I'm sorry, listeners, just like with Firefly, there are only 2 seasons. Oh no, wait, there's only 1 season of Firefly.
Yeah. But there is
I
also
wish there
a
was
rise.
more. Yeah, I'm wobbly hand gesture. I'm in 2 minds about it.
Horrible.
It was all right. I just find it slightly annoying that they did. I think it was 12 episodes, and then they made 6 episodes, but they were the exact same thing. It was just rehashed and brought out again under a slightly different name.
Yeah, I remember, I remember something like that. I'm not sure. But the Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex is absolutely one of my favorite iterations of the Ghost in the Shell franchise. However, let's focus on the original movie, because the in the movie, and I actually watched the making of and documentary and such. They made they wanted to emphasize the philosophy, so they changed the original depiction of Kusanagi in the manga, who is very, well, not necessarily cheerful, but very lively.
A bit more boisterous.
Boisterous, and Matsumu Shiro also has this comedic style, with the exaggerated faces and jokes and stuff like that, and like you said, boisterous.
And she's much more I would say, a bit more interactive with the old ape.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then they've got the movie where they purposely made her more like a doll because they wanted to emphasize the inhuman, the uncanny side of her.
Yeah.
And you know how weird it would be to interact with a cyborg that doesn't blink. You know,
And yet we know that it is someone. It's not a robot trying to be a human. It's actually a human being a robot, but still being human.
yes. Well, in Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, they also touch upon, you know, she's often,
Oh yeah,
kind of scantily clad. Yeah, no, see, it's clearly
she's
a very curvy
aerodynamic.
body and stuff like that. That's her choice, you know. Literally, my body, my choice. And she does that so people will look at her as a woman. I think it's mentioned somewhere that she does that intentionally because, for those who don't know, what's so special about the Major, as he's often referred to, Major Kusanagi, is that she was a cyborg from an extremely young age, even for this world. And in our, was it a Rise or Standalone complex, they explained this is due to a traffic accident.
It was in Arise. It was explained as a traffic accident with her mother, whereby she was still in the womb, and basically they delivered her, but her body was unsustainable, so they moved her straight into a child's prosthetic body.
And they retconned that because in the Standalone complex, she was a child when that happened, and both her parents died. No matter what happens, you know, that's what makes her special. That makes her so in tune with her cyber brain and her body. And also what's very interesting, what they did in the Rise, is that her body in that series at the beginning isn't her own property.
No.
She has a free mind. She has a free conscience. Only her body is government property, which is
and some memories.
Oh. Well, that isn't really that weird. I mean, yeah, it's you can doubt the morality of it, but you know, it's no different from a digital document at that point.
Yeah.
You know, that's super secret.
They can be copied, they can be distributed or so forth, but the ownership of said document or said intellectual property remains with the military.
Yeah, well, isn't that kind of the same like saying, like, I work in document management, you know, I get to see personal information that's only meant for the company, not for me as an individual. I am not allowed to divulge such information. Isn't that the same?
It is pretty much the same, but there is one major difference. The difference being that in your case, being document managing or anyone working in IT dealing with sensitive information, is that they can remember the information and they can share it and then get punished. But with Major Kusanagi and the Ghost in the Shell world, basically it can be deleted. The memories, the data themselves can be entirely erased and replaced to the point where the person does not even remember the fact that they knew secret information.
Yeah. Okay. It's a subtle difference, but it's still a very interesting topic because we might actually have to deal with that problem at one point if things go as the way they go.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, yeah, maybe. Who knows? It's one of those things that has its advantages, but also its disadvantages that we need to, take into account. You know, and especially when it comes to transplanting false memories.
Oh yeah.
Or copying other people's memories and personality.
Or identity hacking.
Yeah.
The point where your mind can literally be hacked, like we mentioned earlier, and your entire identity wiped.
We always talk about the illusion of free choice, but in this world, how do you even know you're acting out of your free choice and not because of a program?
Yeah.
It's a question we're already asking ourselves, only then, it's nature. And in that case, it could be other people's work. So.
Yep. And to be honest, those are issues we're going to have to deal with very soon. However, at the moment they are being espoused as the end of the world. Oh, it's terrible. It's horrible. It'll be nothing worse than things like that happening. But then again, you've got to remember that's the exact same attitude people took towards bank accounts, credit cards, data online, and so forth. At first, people were terrified about these things happening to them, and now it's like, oh, balls! My account's been hacked. All right, let's start the recovery process and so forth, and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that will be applied in reality, that kind of attitude of being able to it is a common day thing. Whether or not that will be applied to the likes of the mind and the identity, biologically and cybernetically, we'll just have to see how society goes with that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. But to continue on my concerns for the coming movie, the thing is, like I said, it is very much inspired by the original movie. And we both have our issues with the original movie. Now, The Matrix did a very good job of ripping off Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, yes.
They literally copied certain scenes from Ghost in the Shell straight into The Matrix. And when I watched the trailers, two things occurred to me right away. First, they copied The Matrix, and they copied the original movie. And what I worry for is that they are trying to imitate the movie too well, and that it becomes the same boring movie, which is, I'm not sure it's going to be that awesome to look at, because I didn't like the lighting in many of those scenes. And
I think part of that is down to the changing from animation to live action. And there's only so much you can do with real life lighting and styling to imitate animation without it becoming animation itself.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. There are even rumors that because of the whole whitewashing thing, they wanted to CGI her face, Scarlett's face, so she would look more Asian.
I've heard those same rumors, and they actually had to make an outright statement saying, "No, we didn't do that." And even if it was made just ambience and scenery, and we certainly did not involve Scarlett Johansson in any of these edits.
Yes.
Which means they probably did.
Yeah, well, who knows? But I wasn't. So that's was my first problem, that they might copy the movie too well and fall in the same traps that the movie did. Why it will not appeal to a very broad audience apart from the fans. Let's talk about that a little later on. Then the lighting, basically dictated much of all the steampunk inspired things that came afterwards, like the piss filters, as they're now called, the golden glow and stuff like that.
Everything.
Yeah, and the fact, well, they might do you had the trailer with the gynoid, the geisha, which is really slow. You got the scene with that she wakes up, which is really slow. All very slow images. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You want to remake, emphasis on, the dreaded remake. You want to remake the movie. But have you remade the right things to make this a commercial success?
Yeah, have they put the emphasis on the correct areas?
Yeah.
And, well, unfortunately, the problem is we have been given 5 tiny teasers with very little context,
True.
very little dialogue, very little view and scenery. I mean, we've got literally nothing to work off other than those things. And here's the thing, I want to speculate wildly about it. Are they going to use a story from or a story or a plot from any of the franchise parts? Are they going to use the original movie plot? Are they going to use something from Standalone Complex or Rise or any of those things? Now, some I suspect they're going to make a horrible mishmash of several of these elements. Because the way they've handled things, maybe it might be a publicity problem for themselves, but the way they've handled things has been pretty poorly in that regards. But I somehow suspect they are going to make a brand new kind of plot. I'm going to use that term very loosely when it comes to Hollywood taking an international story, an international franchise that is not purely Western. They have had a bad habit of bastardizing it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I'm afraid they are trying to recreate the plot of the original movie. Like, they like the scene I've got here. It's very reminiscent of the same scene they also copied in The Matrix. And because it also seems to have a lot of references to The Matrix, which was, by the way, intended to be a Ghost in the Shell movie. But they made some changes to it. So I kind of, worried that they'll try to make the original movie, which, means also a lot of monologues, which is a style we now know from the guys who made The Matrix, and that wasn't a very good. Those weren't successful ideas.
It was successful in the first one as a novelty.
Exactly.
Purely as a novelty,
because
we hadn't been given that before, at least not in Western mainstream media. When it came to the second one and the third one, oh god.
Yeah, those were so boring.
Went on and on and on, and they weren't actually saying anything. No. They weren't putting anything new in front of us. They were just asking questions without answers, and even the questions themselves were really empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they were, part of a postmodernist school of thought. And, postmodernism, I got to learn about it when I was doing history. And, they tried to kind of infiltrate the historical schools. And it was, basically, you couldn't write history anymore because everything was subjective. So everything you wrote and read and thought didn't matter. So, just forget about history. And basically, they wanted to write subjective histories. Just meant they were just pushing their ideological agendas into history books. So that's, and that's kind of what this was exactly. No one understood what they were trying to say. And even though what was the original book called again on which Ghost in the Shell manga was based? Ghost and the Machine?
I have no idea anymore.
It was a philosophical work that explored, the border between man and machine, and it was called
Deus Ex Machina?
No, Ghost in the Machine. It was a very similar title. The Mind in the Machine, something like that. I would have to look it up. But it was basically based on that philosophical work. And, there's also a little bit of Descartes in there, like in the original movie when the puppet maker has created his body. And he gets confronted by an official or police officer. You're just a machine. And he replies with, I think, therefore I exist.
Yep. Any argument to the otherwise can be countered with, well, so are you. But the philosophy is there's going to be a clash of the philosophies when it comes between Hollywood and Japanese or Asian cinema and entertainment in general. The other issue, though, is there is a countenance to this, that it can be done. Hollywood can take something from another culture and be a tribute to it while making it its own. Perfect example: Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, which is basically literally Seven Samurai, story thereof, and seven cowboys.
Right. Yeah.
And that was huge, and to the point where Magnificent Seven is now being remade. And I think I heard rumors of Seven Samurai being redone in Japan as well. That's a perfect example of it can be done. It can have that philosophy transferred over while still giving it to the mainstream audience, rather than the international one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as I said earlier, the difference here is they've pretty much taken everything, including the setting, the characters, and so forth, except this one thing.
Right. Yeah, well, I'm really curious what route they will take. By the way, I just got informed by one of our listeners. It was indeed the Ghost in the Machine. So yeah, there's a book for you to pick up, I suppose. But where was I going with this? Well, I think we talked a little bit, speculated a little bit enough where the movie's going. We just have to see. And I wanted to go somewhere. One question I really wondered is: do you think this movie will sell in China?
In China?
Yeah.
China or Japan?
No, China. Specifically China. They're only allowed to air 44 movies over there each year that are Western. Are not allowed to star Brad Pitt. They either should vilify the American army or glorifize the Chinese army. And not talk about Hong Kong.
I think... considering those conditions, and if there's like a maximum amount, I don't think Ghost in the Shell's going to make it. Great as the entire Asian cultures and all of the diverse elements thereof, which increases in the future when you think about it, considering the Great Firewall can't maintain itself sooner or later. It's gonna collapse, and there's gonna be this huge clash of the cultures and mixing, diversification, blending. Considering all these elements, it's going to be inevitable. But whether or not it's going to make it in the official list, nah, I don't think so. It's too far out there, and it's too much. I think any kind of officials that would consider it for release in China will be far too critical of the Western elements placed into the movie, so that the movie would be accommodated by the entire world rather than just Asia.
I am going to start the stream again because I just got... now we're live again. Okay, weird. Now we're off again. Let's see. We're live again. Sorry about that, people. That was a little mechanical problems on YouTube's end.
Blame him.
Yeah.
It was him.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're wonderful. Anyway, so yeah, that was kind of a question I wondered because it's a kind of a hot topic. Because there are a lot of films made that are specially made to cater either to Chinese companies or to the Chinese army, or have to vilify the American forces, like I think they did in one of the Transformers movie.
That's the other part, is that obviously the American forces were stationed in Japan and continue to be stationed in Japan. So everything kind of Japan has got a somewhat Western influence, whether it likes it or not. And has been applied back towards the Western world because of it. I think part because of the Japanese an American cooperation there, that's going to be another kind of negative mark against it being released in China.
Yeah, they don't want to have anything to do with the Japanese.
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing that what was it? Not when did the Japanese invasion happen?
Second World War.
There you go.
My mother was part of it.
There you go.
So,
Because of all of that, they still have this huge thing against Japan and any kind of. It's the worst of both worlds that they despise: Japan and the Western world. I'm not saying this spies in like, oh, we hate all Americans. No, it's just general kind of attitude in officialdom and design thereof.
Well, it's all the government. That's one thing for sure. I mean, I regularly watch China Uncensored. And they also show the kind of movies they show in China, which are all anti-Japanese. It's all those over-the-top kung fu movies. Only they're slaughtering Japanese soldiers by the millions. It's
The only kind of propaganda would be worse than that is North Korean.
Yeah, probably. Oh, that's also. Anyway, but will this movie show in Japan for that matter?
I think it will show in Japan. However, I have looked up various responses from Japanese, either official or man on the street type responses and so forth. And when it comes to Western adaptations of elements or movies, music, and so forth from Japan or any other country, Japanese don't really seem to care one way or the other. They didn't care when it was Magnificent Seven. They didn't care with anything else. When it comes to dubbing things from Japan over into English languages, they don't care. It's fine. It's like, go on, take it, have it.
Yeah.
We don't care. We've got our own version. You've got yours.
Yeah,
go for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure there are some fanatics that will are like, yeah, I gotta have it. I mean, it will be a collector's item, I suppose. Unless
that's exactly what they said about Ghost in the Shell First Assault, which is supposedly the first MMO shooter game, and I've played it. It's not that brilliant.
No, I know it exists,
advertised,
but
it got advertised with all this kind of story and so forth. But no, there's no story. There's no kind of cinematics or anything. It's just purely a Team Fortress 2 type game. Okay. It's just got elements of Ghost in the Shell.
Is that Ghost in the Shell or Ghost in the Shell standalone complex?
Standalone complex, very much so.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. I think it only appeared on consoles as well, so that doesn't help.
Might be wrong. There was a separate game. There was a game, I think, of Ghost in the Shell, but what I'm talking about has only just recently been released as beta. And yeah, I paid for beta. Never pay for beta. Never. Just wait. Just wait until it comes out as a gold standard, and then wait for the Steam. Then wait for the Steam sale.
Yeah. So there's a new Ghost in the Shell game coming. That's interesting. I think they were also working on a Shadowrun MMO or something.
Yeah, I'm not entirely 100% on that one. First I've heard of it, but I will say one thing is that the Ghost in the Shell architecture of the internet and so forth, huge influence to the point where firewall and internet security companies have even used the whole user interface, the whole kind of little circles with lines going back and forth and all. They've used that user interface, the graphic user interface, for their own security displays, whereby they can see in real time all the internet connections and security faults and so forth of all the networks they monitor.
Yeah, well, I think in about every science fiction movie, cyberpunk movie they made ever since then, all have those similar displays. similar ways of how augmented reality works, how those projected interfaces work and look. I think Ghost in the Shell's influence, even though not many people realize it, Ghost in the Shell is in so many franchises. Deus Ex, Syndicate.
Oh, yes, very much so. I mean, I've watched it, and specifically the prosthetic bodies, the limbs and everything, huge. It's like, yeah, that's Major Kusanagi, exact same model. I know it.
Oh yeah, I'll bet there are so many references. I don't think people realize how much they owe to Ghost in the Shell. To this perverted little hermit that lives somewhere in Japan and barely anyone knows how he looks. I don't think he appears in any. I don't think he doesn't make any public appearances whatsoever.
If he does, they are very low key and last minute and don't have much. Probably stays away from the limelight altogether. Probably has to only make an appearance when he has to.
Mm-hmm. Probably. Well, I even heard, I have to check, but I even heard that the only person he speaks to is his publisher. And, every other contact has to go through his publisher.
Well, considering how zealous Japanese fans, or the fandoms in Japan can be, it's probably a very wise idea.
Mm-hmm. Now, I could be confusing him with somebody else now, but I think he's really that much of almost a NEET he comes across as. But what I've seen, he's probably a very busy man. He actually made a kind of a sequel to Ghost in the Shell 2.0. He made Ghost in the Shell 2.0. I don't think many people were really interested in it, though.
I got linked a minute ago, actually, via Trigo, via the TSU chat, about Shadowrun being made online, an MMO, as you mentioned. And Shadowrun, huge cyberpunk influence, a lot of fantasy in it, because it is in the end based on a role-play game. Tabletop, I think, even. Or
the
I might begin the other way around.
I have the 4th edition books, yeah.
But it is it is a brilliant game, and to see it being made as an MMO, it has been funded. It is going to happen.
They're working on it for
keep
years, by the way. It's been in the pipeline for years.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Kickstarter page for it now, and it's like, yeah, it's done, it's going. September, things are moving to the warehouse. Yeah. So, exciting.
Yeah, so maybe Shadowrun is a good topic for the next time. When
very much so.
Because I love Shadowrun, and also because so much of it is also happening in Europe.
Very much so.
Yeah, there's very little lore on the Netherlands, unfortunately, but Europort is a major runner haven, as they're called.
It's just admit it, Rotterdam has taken over the entire of the Netherlands as now just purely a trading hub.
Yeah, the Europort,
an entire country.
It's I don't know. I lived near the Europort for up to 6 years ago, and then I literally moved out of the smoke up to the other side of the Netherlands, and you don't notice anything about it other than a lot of trucks going west. Everything there is acquired land. So you've got the Delta works there, and stuff like that. But it is such a cyberpunk environment, where you're driving there at night past all those, like Shell and all those major refineries. It's it's a miracle how clean they have been able to keep the air there, to be quite frank with you. But I could see those you have no idea what flat means until you've been to the west of the Netherlands. And I could see like the chimneys, those 30-meter high chimneys of Europort at the horizon, and it's.
I lived in Gorkum.
Okay.
Well, not near Gorkum, near Gorkum, in a little village called Almkerk. Flat farmers' land everywhere. The only kind of break in the visual were a couple of dikes, and that was it.
Is that how you got your name Dutch?
Yes, yes. In Holland, I was the weird English kid, and when I moved to England when I was 14, I was the weird Dutch kid. So, Dutch it was.
Well, maybe we can reminisce on that some other time. But I think I have no idea how long we've been talking. Actually, well, long enough, little over an hour. So
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute pleasure. We talked about quite a lot. We talked about a little bit about philosophy, about future prediction, about a franchise we're both very passionate about, and yeah, who knows what we'll talk about next.
I think we have covered a lot, but there's still so much hidden away in the depth of Ghost in the Shell, and I advise anyone watching this or listening to this to really just dig in. There's so much to chew on, and you don't have to agree with everything that's presented to you. You don't have to agree with the worldview, the philosophy, or even the technology for that matter. But you can't deny that these things, all of them, are possibilities. And my personal opinion is that is exactly the direction we're heading towards.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about, Ghost in the Shell standalone complex sometime.
Yes, definitely, because that's what was that, 24 episodes each season?
Something, yeah. I'll have to watch it again, but it will be worth it because it's also it's beautifully animated. It set a new standard for animation series. Actually, looking forward to that. Just have to make the time. But I think we'll keep it at that for tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was sponsored together with Dutch Baracuda of the Army of Toy Soldiers. Their link will be down below. And for those who want to learn more about the Toy Soldiers, we also did a interview with Gonzo and Lieutenant Sophie, who tell everything you could possibly want to know about the Toy Soldiers and what they're doing. So, yeah. With that, I'll just say you adieu, and as always, make it your way. Good night.